Welcome back to the Arbitrage.Run show, Kevin. The first show that we've recorded in a while. We've been on the live stream train, and there's not a shortage of things to talk about in Zed this week, is there?
Unfortunately, yes, I will say.
Yes, there is a shortage.
Or yeah, unfortunately, no, there's not. I wish it was yes.
Yeah, whew, it was a tough weekend, especially if you were out on social media and you're a fan of ZED Run. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there right now. I'll start here, Kevin, by saying I personally do want to apologize to the community for this like whole Zed Pulse debacle. Um, the intentions were good. I think on both sides. I'm not gonna like totally throw everyone at VHS and Z under the bus because I really do, having interacted with all of them, the intentions were right behind this like idea of communication. And then somewhere it went terribly, terribly wrong. Obviously, it's like we're putting these communications out there and putting the Z stamp of approval on them, saying one thing, and then just like out of nowhere we're going to do the opposite. Like I don't know, it's hard to wrap my mind around as like just thinking from like a communication standpoint and relationship standpoint. Like I don't know in what world that this is like looked at as like an okay way to operate, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know, like organizationally, if they just operate in a vacuum, but yeah, I think the most recent one being when you're talking with Rob, who's like the guy, not even mentioning anything that was about to drop. Like you would think he had some kind of awareness, but I don't know. It's unfortunately not the first time, may not be the last, who knows, but this kind of took it to another level, it felt like.
Yeah, and we can talk about the merits of this 10% rake all we want, and the weekly maiden, which are the two sticking points for this whole Zed is burning kind of thing going on. And I think there are there's legitimate defenses to these. I don't agree with it, right? I don't think either. These are not the choices that either you or I would have made if we were knowing what we know, right? Which is not everything, right? We don't have the benefit of like all the knowledge of management team, right? And what's going on, but these are not the choices we would have made. Still, I can accept them, right? And try to see the direction that is being shifted to. It's just like it needs to be communicated in a different way. You can't just like make these changes seemingly on a whim, seemingly like desperate, and not communicate with the community and come out with we've got this outlet that we've created with the pulse, right? This is the
Hmm.
whole idea, is to try to get out in front of this stuff, proactively communicate. Okay, you got to change direction, and you can't stick to what was said previously. Let's get an emergency video out there, right? And say, we got to change this. We got to change this. This is why. This is what we're thinking. And this is why it's actually a benefit to the game and the community, right? Like, I don't know. It's just, to me, that's common sense, but we don't know everything, I guess.
Yeah, I have no idea. It was just like comical timing. How you have like the highest profile interview on the Pulse you've had, and then nothing of like that substance was put out. No fault against you. I think you were as in the dark as anybody, trying to do the best you could. So kind of collateral damage on that, but it is unfortunate all around.
Yeah, and I don't know like what the path forward is for me and the polls. I mean, I guess that's really kind of secondary, right? Like we've got bigger issues at hand, but I don't know how, if there's a way to salvage this, because like I mean, I felt like we were making some headway, and there is a benefit to the community to have those lines of communication open. It's just like I don't know how we unwind this and get back to a point where there's any trust between the organization and the community and anything that's said on the poll. So I don't know. It's really a tough position. Hopefully, we can find a positive way forward. I titled this. I don't know if we'll stick with this title, but as we're recording it here, I titled it "Is Zed Dead?" Total clickbait here,
Hmm.
because obviously we're going to get into the meat of this show. We just purchased a bunch of horses, so no, we don't think Zed is dead. No, we don't agree with these changes, and especially how it was handled. But the way that you and I operate, we keep pushing forward, right? We adapt, and I do see that like there is a big segment of the community that is going to take a different stance and boycott and try to use what power they have to incite change, I guess. And I think there's validity to that, but it's just not how we operate, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the validity is that like that a huge portion of the horses are no longer like even remotely profitable, right? And then on top of that, they're getting rid of some of like the premier or like the open type tournaments for each class and reducing the juice there, which only exacerbates the issue. Um, so like we may have like an inadvertent boycott just because we're not going to be throwing money at something that is not going to have any potential upside. But with that said, they did lay out a fairly, I guess, clean vision for the next few weeks in terms of what they're trying to do to incentivize these younger horses having more of a path to, I guess, 500 races at this point, where you can see what they're trying to do, and they're kind of hurting the more established horses as a result. But that's partly what you teased with our recent purchases. That was our mindset and pivoting a little bit more towards that because, yeah, we're, I guess, as old horse leaning as any stable in Zed, just because like all of our horses I feel like are 1,000 plus races in. So if that is the pivot Zed's doing, we were very behind. So trying to play catch up a little bit. And with the timing of the announcements, a lot of FUD, a lot of good horses hitting the market, and a lot of pricing inefficiencies as a result.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to respond to there in what you just said. I mean, we are old horse leaning just because at like the top end, right? We've bred a ton. We got a ton of talent in the stable that have very very lightly raced and potential. And we purchased a lot of 3.0s back when there was that 3.0 experiment with all the terms. So we do have a lot. We've got a lot of diversity in the stable already. But yeah, there was opportunity. You identified opportunity, and I never say no when you identify an opportunity. That would be stupid. But um, so you said they've outlined this vision clearly, and I think that obviously there's an issue there. Like clear to us, like you're able to read between the lines, and here's this announcement, and well, there's all kinds of opportunity, and this actually does kind of make sense, right? But not everybody sees that, and not everybody's going to hear that. And you go out on social media and everybody's saying, well, this is the last nail in the coffin for Zed, and they're making these terrible moves. And that's exactly the issue. Like, this could have been communicated and explained and proactively. Like, it actually does kind of make sense, right? Just how it was gone about, and the reintroduction of Rake, like immediately at like there was this like optimism and excitement with XP NFTs, and then it's like,
Mhm.
wait, 2 days later, let's just smash the hammer down and kill everybody. It's like everything that had been worked for just straight down the drain. I don't know, man. It's really
Yeah.
tough, but we just keep going forward, I guess. What
Yeah, I don't
other
know.
choices
I
are
mean,
there?
I would say like XP NFTs were received better than expected. A lot of people were like, "Oh, this is actually doable, and it's kind of addicting to see it layer on your horse." There's always skeptics, like there is with anything, but yeah, to just have that positive reaction and just I don't know if the logic is like, "Yep, all right, it's positive. Let's do it. Let's do it while they're feeling good," which is just a horrible logic if so. But it's not the first time they've done something like this. And the other thing is like they're claiming to be a data-driven company, but you now have no earthly idea the impact of rolling out XP NFTs. Like any control period, you no longer have the one variable you change. Now you just change like four variables, and of course numbers are going to plummet. And if they like, I don't know, I don't think they'll throw it all on XP NFTs, obviously, but like paid racing is going to be incredibly low this week.
Yeah, and oh, I forgot to respond to. Yeah, I mean the boycott is going to happen naturally. Like that, I don't see the need for it. Yeah, I get like we're all upset that this communication and really like blatant disrespect to the community and what the community feels, and it's just a slap in the face. Like, I get boycotting because of that, right? Because of the rake, like, it's going to happen naturally. They're going to have to reduce it, unless we're all totally wrong on the math, right? And like this overlay that they create in these tournaments is enough to substantiate and support this 10% rate. I don't think it is. Like, I'd be
Yeah,
shocked, right?
there's the economics of it are kind of interesting and partly drove some of our purchases. But basically, what they've done, right, is with this 5% as it stands right now, going back into the treasury. They're subsidizing different areas of the game that they want engagement to farm to, right? In this case, the way they laid it out is clearly going to the less than 250 race horses and the less than 500. I think in a 40K a week model, they said like 24K was going to those two segments, or less than something 80 in a different class. So like the newer, younger horses that are trying to progress. So that is where the opportunity is. Those are the types of horses where you'll be able to offset the 10% rake you're paying, be a little negative EV in the paid racing because it's so heavily overlaid in the paid tournament. The places it's not going to survive are the ones that are subsidizing those areas, who are paying thousands in rake and only getting like a $500 tournament. You're just not going to be able to offset that. So that's where the zig and zag is going to be for our stable. And I think it's an interesting thought process for a lot of stables.
Yeah, all of these changes, it just happens over and over in Zed. Like too many changes at once, and the pendulum swings so far from one direction to the next.
Totally.
Because now it's like you still got to have these incentives for leveling and having the top horses in the game, right? Like I don't see how all of it works without that. And now we're going in this other direction again, just like with that 3.0 swing, and it just goes back to that like if you're going to change everything so drastically so quickly, how can anything ever hold like substantial value, right?
Mhm. Yeah, it goes back to like when early in Zed, when I was just trying to make my money back in like 2 or 3 months on a purchase. Now it's like prices have fallen so significantly that you should almost be targeting like, can I make this back in a month? Because who knows when they're going to flip a switch or do something that just totally makes your horse benched for a good amount of time. But I do agree, like this is the pendulum going that exact opposite direction. The final state is going to have to cater more towards the top end. It can't just be all for horses that are early in their life. Otherwise, what's the point of this XP NFT system? It's just like it just doesn't make sense as an in-game loop to do that. So I think it's more pendulum than like total end state of what they're trying to get. But I don't know. I just wish it wasn't sprung so quickly on us with no communication, no rationale. When there was, yeah, there's such a good avenue to explain it with the polls.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. I guess we've hit enough on it, and the community itself is is enough in tune and bearings that enough that we don't need to harp on this any further, and we can kind of get into some. I mean, we're moving forward. We're going to keep going. So we want to talk about the maiden format, which is part of part of this. It's a new weekly maiden, and it's totally different. We need to discuss how that's different. And then we're going to go over the 10 horses, I think maybe 11 horses now that we've just purchased over the last like 12 hours or so. And then, so we're just going to run through those horses and why. And then we're also going to talk about an XP NFT strategy, how we're going about that. Cadet actually reached out to me this morning and asked if we would. And I mean, I kind of went over it with Keith, but I think everybody wants your input. And I think that after seeing these XP NFTs in play for the tournament with the multipliers last night, there is maybe some new light bulbs going on and new questions and stuff like that. So I think that is an interesting conversation. You've got a hard stop here in like 35 minutes or something like that. So we'll try to move pretty quick through this stuff, starting with the maiden, Kevin. So it's changing to weekly. You know, everybody liked the monthly maiden. It was like that last like chance to win a big pot, right? So this is naturally a pretty unpopular decision, especially among the people that were playing Zed more passively, the ones that were already upset, right, with the direction of Zed. It's like you've taken away that last thing that they really liked. Oh, and we didn't even mention we're canceling the zombie arbitrage maiden because of this last minute change to the maiden. It doesn't. We need to figure out a new structure, and we're kind of kicking around. I had some people reach out with ideas. I think Full in One was maybe one of the people that had a weekly kind of suggestion where we could maybe just have it open with different price tiers and have like a month end where they all go against each other, kind of thing. So like you pay more if you're entering in that first week because you're going to be able to level more, type of a thing. But we haven't really had a chance in all of this chaos to work with Joe to figure out that new format, right?
Yeah, certainly we're going to be able to put something together in 2 days, like like Zed kind of made us force our hand to do. So that's a whole separate thing. But yeah, no zombie maiden just doesn't work logistically with the new setup.
So the ZED Maiden, anyway, it's less than 21 races. So what's really important here is that you don't need Griffin. So we've got all these horses that we may have run, 5 times for a previous like short maiden or something like that. Those are all eligible if they got less than 21 races, but you need a minimum of 10. So anything that's over 10 races is there's no sense in running in these maidens because you need 10 to qualify, and then it's best of. So you can run all the way up to year 21. And I think this first one's going to be pretty darn competitive, right?
Yeah, that's where like it gets interesting from a game theory perspective because normally they had the breeds from the most recent period funding that given maiden. So like if it was a super competitive maiden, at least the prize pool reflected that. Um, what they did now is basically they stalled maidens for a month and they're still going to this weekly prize pool. So you have this backlog of horses that may or may not have been bred, but it should be a very competitive maiden that has 12 spots of qualifying basically for every bucket, and you're still playing for that deflated prize pool. So, yeah, one option is run maybe one or two this time, see if you start hot. But the probably most profitable option would just be completely fade this first maiden, assume they're going to keep the pot the same for next, and let everybody else run their horses. And then you're going to be fighting against probably a quarter of the field next week for the same prize pool.
Yeah. So that's another thing that somebody reached out to me, but well, a couple of things here. So you can run a few races in this one, see how you start, and then cut bait, and then run in the next one. That's a totally valid strategy because you no longer need that Griffin. And theoretically, you could do that. I mean, you could run like 2 races for this one. If you don't get a win, wait for the next one, run 2 races, and didn't get a win. Okay, then I'm going to go for the third or the fourth one and just spend all of mine because it is still best of. So there's an advantage to getting, a bunch of races and selecting your top 10 scores out of there. And then I just did a test, Kevin, on whether a horse will remain on the leaderboard once they hit 21, 22 races, and they do. So that was another question that I got, which is obviously a good question with the historical leaderboard issues and stuff. But it seems that if you go over the 21 races, at least as far as I can tell on the test that I just did with our horse Blood Fame, which is now at 22, it was at 19 or it was at 20. I threw it in a race. It popped up on the leaderboard with one race. Then I threw it in another one. Obviously, it didn't count that race, but it stayed on the leaderboard. So I think, as far as I can tell, you're going to be able to continue to level your horse higher prior to the tournament running.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Because if you feel that you're qualified and you just hit your 21, get your all your best stuff you could possibly have, especially in class one is probably where it matters most. Start running some paids, like the cheap double ups or even just freeze with the boost on. And yeah, that's a big advantage.
So it's a $10,000 prize pool for each of these 4 weekly maidens this month. I guess the merits of this, it does make sense when you think about it that like this people only breeding for this monthly maiden and then kicking their horses to the side wasn't really great for the economy, right? Like you want this like smooth game loop that people are like constantly incentivized to breed and continue to race those horses in these new formats, the less than 250, the less than 500 in this stuff. It makes sense in theory. Is it actually going to work? I don't know because everybody's pissed off about it because it wasn't communicated well. And, I don't know. It's really hard. It's really hard to see whether this is going to work or not. It could though, right?
It could work, and they're definitely erring on the side of forcing it to work by putting so much of the prize pools into this early game loop. So I mean, I think it's going to work early on. It'll be interesting to see if it works once they kind of stop subsidizing so much with the early stuff. Um, it'll also be interesting to see if it works with all the pessimistic sentiment as well, where people are going to feel the shell shock of having this rake. So, like, are they going to be able to fill these tournaments? I would lean yes because they're just going to be pretty big tournaments considering it's just 10 paids. But I don't know. They may. It'll be interesting to see it play out. I don't know.
It will. And then what happens, assuming we're right and they have to lower the rake to whatever, 7, 5%, something like that. And maybe it's just a thing where it's like, okay, 10% did not hit the mark this week. Next week we go down to 8. Oh, 8% didn't work. And then finally we end up at 5 or something that actually finds like equilibrium or something. I don't know. But then what happens to those prize pools? Do those have to shrink? And it's just a constant like weighing of the scale, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could see why they wanted a model like this, right? Like just trying to like figure out what they saw behind the curtain. I mean, I'm sure breeds were super cyclical where you just saw a massive spike like once a month basically for a few days driven by the maidens. So they're trying to smooth that out. And then yeah, you see the abandon rate or whatever you want to call it of these horses that were just bred, which feels like an awful experience for a new user. So you want to just increase the engagement period with each new horse bred, which this does in theory. Like it makes the horse fairly viable if you get a good roll for like 500 races. Um, Whereas in the past, you would have just been playing for the maiden and then yeah, putting it aside.
Yeah, it feels like, and I think you and I had the same conversation. These changes feel like an executive sitting in an ivory tower looking at just raw data, right? And no context behind it, complete disregard for community sentiment and what the community wants, right? And just like, here's what the numbers say. This will work based on the numbers, right? We're going to do it now, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It
And
absolutely feels that like out of touch. I agree. That's where I'd be like shocked. I feel like Ryan's been the scapegoat for a lot of this, and I'm sure a lot of the ideas were his or Facundo's, but I think the driving principle of it, which is basically yeah, that this metric is an issue. Let's smooth it out. I want this, and like your logical recommendation would be this type of maiden, but there's no way like someone who played the game for over a year would make that disconnected of a recommendation. I think.
yeah, it's tough. It is tough. I mean, we've been over it over and over and over again. Like, we can't be that reactive when people have invested this much money. Got to communicate out in advance, be proactive. This is why everyone's upset.
It was
Just a
kind of a
little.
snowball too, because like people were upset. Because like we knew the maiden was coming this week. There was no announcement for it, so we were like upset, expecting the big monthly maiden. And then not only do they like not give update on that, they just totally throw a curveball and change the exact like format as well. And then they throw in like the whole rake issue on top of it. So it was just yeah, not to go back to that. It was just
It's hard
really
to get away
strange.
from it because it's total bait and switch behavior, right? Like, you
Yeah.
can't advertise one thing. Everybody goes in thinking we're playing for this. We know that we've been breeding and it's going to this prize pool and it's going to be one big event. And we've kind of got precedent on what those look like. And so yeah, I'm going to commit this money to this breed, and then boom, $10,000 prize pool, and it's going to be the same for the next 4 weeks. Like, that's just not right. It's just not. I don't
And
know
like
what world that's right to do.
right, and these are not assumptions either. Like you had the pulse, and they literally said like the exact opposite on like from the horse's mouth, right? Like they said it was a monthly maiden, like that was going to be the cadence. So it's not even like it was like we were making these assumptions. You can't assume a Z. No, like you built this new communication platform. They said something and then just did the exact opposite, which is to your point, probably just a new voice in their ear from really high up saying, "Nope, you got to do this. You have no choice. Make it happen."
Yeah. So anyway, 6,000 of the 10,000. I saw Sonar complaining about this online. Is going to class one. Um,
I think there's some credibility to that complaint. I think Sonar and us have kind of had differing opinions on that. I'm on his camp on this one. Like that's 60% going to class one when it's probably, I don't know, what percent of horses, 5 or 10. Like it should be juiced, but I'm a big fan of each class kind of for like proportionally funding their own maiden pool.
yeah. Well, again, I'd like to hear the explanation for this because I think, at least I feel like I read somewhere, whether it was in Discord or on Twitter or something, that these are proportional to the money spent to breed those horses in those classes. Theoretically, I think it's possible that 60% was spent to breed the class one horses, because like, what horses are being bred right now? Mostly legendaries, because it's like you and I, right? It's like we're not going to waste our time breeding exclusives and elites for the most part right now, but these Genesis have unlimited supply, and we land in class one, right? And like you're gonna breed the best Genesis Nakamoto studs. So I think theoretically, it could be plausible that 60% of the breed fees came from the horses that were bred into class one.
Interesting. If that's true, then I would change my tune because I mean that is the logic I think that it should follow. Um, and then we just have them kind of yeah self-sustaining in that aspect. I would be surprised if it was a full 60%, but yeah, I could see a scenario where like we didn't know a maiden was coming. The only ones yeah being bred like you said are the no-brainers, and then yeah an RSB is going in for 0.15 or something, so
Right.
that's the same as like I don't know 5, 10 of the crosses being bred, so you get
More
disproportionate that
probably,
way.
yeah. Because everyone's
Well,
breeding buterins and stuff, trying to save money at the lower levels, you know?
yeah, but once
So,
again, that'd be like an improper use of incomplete data, right? Like, because they'd be better served just looking at the last maiden when it was a full cycle. People know a maiden's coming in the full breeding picture. That's the number I would be shocked if it was 60% class one, because only like 5% of bred horses go into class one, right? And it's something very small.
I think that's like exclusives. I think like 5% of exclusives. Maybe it's 2% of exclusives.
Yeah, but I don't. Yeah, I'd be curious to know that number because
I think
if
it's like 30% of legendaries end up in class one, and most breeding is legendary right now. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. That I think that is part of like the underlying issue that a lot of people have been complaining about. It's like, okay, you guys are all about data, but how are you interpreting this data? You know, and
Mhm.
I think that's a big question. Anyway, that's what's going on with the maiden, as far as we can tell. We'll see if they stick to this. I think that's, to be honest, a lesser issue than this like 10% rake sprung on us out of nowhere after we've seen how destructive 10% rake can be. And we were told that it wouldn't be coming until sit and goes, you know. But anyway, we'll just keep dwelling on that. Even say you after say we're gonna move past
It
it.
was just like just blatantly wrong. So like it's just yeah, it's hard to not revisit.
You want to move on from the maiden to the horse purchases that we just made?
Yeah, more positive notes on that. There is quite a bit of opportunity out there.
Yeah, at least we think so anyway. I almost tweeted out this yesterday, and thank goodness that I didn't, because I think I would would have been like roasted without having the context of like we don't approve what Zed is doing, and everybody's like boycotting. We're like, you know what? We just went out and bought 10 horses because
Yeah,
we
been
love
a
it.
read the room type thing.
Yeah, exactly. But they came out last night and they announced the where the prizes are going. Finally, again, this should be explained in advance. Like we should know beforehand. Okay, 10% rake is coming, but this is the idea behind it, and this is why it makes sense, and this is why it's good for the ecosystem. But it's like we find out that an hour before the maiden starts, maybe less, like what's going on, and then after that, we find out where the 10% or the 5% of the 10% rake is going towards in the community. Anyway, I think the big thing, right, is that they're adding these less than 500 races, less than 500 career races, and with a tournament this week, and it's $12,500 prize pool. I think the uncertainty here, Kevin, is like, are they going to decide to change that next week, right?
Right. That's where like you can zoom out a little bit and just try to envision like the bigger picture of what they're doing. And that's where I feel a little more confident this isn't just a 1 week thing. It might be a 1 week thing in terms of the percents they're allocating, but it makes sense from a game to like have these bridges towards 500 plus races where you have that like less frequent aging of being able to run. So I think from a game perspective, you can see the vision, which is why we had the confidence to at least, I guess, think all these purchases. We hope we can make the money back in a month or even less. But we have the confidence that this isn't just like a one-off, 1 week thing.
Hopefully not, or these were bad buys.
If I
Um,
hopefully that's priced in, right? Like you would think we're not actually paying like fair market value because people are uncertain and worried. A lot of these had been listed in the last day or so as a reaction to the news, I think. So you'd hope that's reflected in the price.
Yeah, so we purchased let's see, I think there's 11 of them here. I think 11 total, and I've got the quick notes here, but generally these are all less than 500. There's one, two, three of them that are four of them that are less than 250. So I don't know. Do you want to walk us through? Yeah, I mean, you were the one that brought these buys. I wasn't really thinking about it because I was distracted with all of the man. I got pulled in for sure to the chaos, and
Uh-huh.
to your credit, you just don't like you don't get into the drama. It's just like what you know what you can do and what you can't do, and just keep moving forward. And you identify the opportunities very quickly. Whether that's some people may have criticism of that, I suppose, that you're not out there using the platform to just roast Zed, but I think to each their
Yeah.
own. Like we have to stick to our genuine personalities, right?
Yeah, and here's my thing is on Twitter, I would not add any value. Like anything I would say has already been said by members of similar, I guess, I don't know, similar stature in the community. I would
Nobody
prefer
has
to
your
use this where
stature.
you can like, what's that?
Nobody has your stature.
Well, that's why we have this platform then. So like, I prefer would to like give
Context.
reactions in
Yeah.
more than 250 characters since I'm not a blue check mark Twitterer. Um, it's just less room for interpretation. You get context a little better in this format. So yeah, I mean, typically I'll give my opinion. It'll just be in a more different platform than Twitter. So I think we've done that today. But with this, yeah, I mean, it's more so just like blocking out the noise, trying to figure out what their vision for the game is, where the opportunity lies, and it was, I think, very apparent if you are in Discord and were able to see like the announcement they gave for this week upcoming. I think these tournaments will start tonight, meaning Monday East Coast time, USA, um, where they're flooding money towards the 250 less races and 500 less races. I think the 250 or less was a little more common knowledge because we've had those for a while. There's been tournaments. Um, the less than 500 was a new addition, if I remember correctly, further bridging that gap to the mature horse age. Um, so that's new, and that's where we found a lot of the opportunities early on. I think we had 11 purchases. Saberwalk was just bought, so I think that's just a 717 on the last one. But early on, it was looking for basically the most extreme outliers for their age, right? And outlier, for me at least, mainly looked at the level. Level, especially in tier one or class one, is the biggest predictor of ROI. At this point, you just have to assume races are going to be run optimally, um, especially in the tournament format. So you really in class one just need to be out leveling the field if you want to be able to come close to offsetting that 10% rake. So the idea here was if you're leveled up more than your peers, given the number of races you've had, you should have an advantage when you get to like maturity in that band, right? So what could have been, I think, is more of just a price play. That's super cheap, pretty good level for a 73 racer. A lot of runway in the 250 and then 500 there. Um, I'll highlight whiskey and weed. I think that's a big one where it's really just starting in that 250 to 500 band, which is going to be new. And 0.25 is a lot. I mean, I would take basically close to a tournament win to pay that off.
That's like a
But
Genesis Nakamoto.
yeah, it pretty pretty much. Um, and I think the other piece here, most of these are legendary, so they should have some breedability, especially they're female. That's not even really contemplated in my valuation, but a
Yeah, I
little
know it
upside.
wasn't, and I created the sheet and put down, there's some pedigree here, and I still think that there's breeding changes coming, regardless of, okay, they said it on the pulse, and the pulse has zero credibility now. I still think they have to be coming, and so I think that there should be some sort of semblance of value in the breeding department at some point, assuming
Right.
that Zed is, they don't just like pack up camp and leave overnight one night.
Yep. Yeah. And starting level is very correlated with current level when you adjust for number of races. So you would think breeding 3.1 or 3.2, whatever they're calling it, if they're using starting level as an indicator, these should breed well on top of that. But that's outside of my valuations. Back to whiskey and weed, the 0.25 is a lot, but we have 150 plus races to run in this less than 500 band. I don't know if they're going to be best of tournaments or average of, but to me that reads as like up to 15 or 14, we'll call it 14 weeks of tournaments potentially within this band. And you're looking at a horse who's already 641. Not only do I think that horse will actually be profitable in the 10% rake system, one of the like few horses that can be, it should be a force to be reckoned with in almost every less than 500 tournament for the next 150 races. So it was a premium. I think is enough of an outlier from a level perspective for a horse with 350 races that I was fine paying that price.
And
And it's
also,
just kind of varying. Go ahead.
well, they've said that the 601 to 650 conditionals are coming. I don't know what that means with 10% rake. Like you said, I don't know what those races look like, but theoretically, this horse could compete there. And a lot of these that you purchased could compete in that segment, especially if they decide to start shifting these prize pools around, which is a lot of the risk here, right? The shifting meta
Yeah.
shifting so quick, right?
Yeah, so you gotta shift, and maybe I mean, there's some value in doing that, right? Like let different people play the game differently. So it doesn't need to be every single week is the exact same like that. So if they did that, that's a good example of yeah, you just shift your tournament, or maybe you decide whiskey and weed is too valuable in the less than 500. We don't want to burn races on a band where it's going to be competing against comparable levels. We could race in the less than 500 next week when it has a 25 level advantage. Um, Things like that are fun decisions you have to make and actually bring some skill into it. Which, when I say there's promise in like the vision of what they've done with the segmented racing by age, I actually do like a lot of that stuff. It's just completely drowned out by the lack of communication on the bigger items. Um, let's see, whiskey and weed. Yeah, talking about that one, and that was the mindset really for all of them. The more recent purchase, Saber Walk, I think we just bought like 30 minutes before the episode. That was a little different. Obviously, a brand new horse, but it had a starting level of 520 from Saber Trust. I'm pretty sure this cost about that much to breed, right? The
Had to.
minimum for
0.081,
Nakamoto.
I think, probably is the minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, so you got like breed cost basically. You got a good level roll. 520 is very solid, and it had already run twice for this maiden. It had a first and a third in a best of format in class one, where the prize pool is more juice than other classes. So that was one kind of a maiden play, hoping we can continue on the good start of qualifying. And then it has a good starting level, so there's reason to believe when it gets to 200 races in, it could be a force in that less than 250 group as well. So a lot of upside there for 0.09.
Yeah, and I think this one is the one that I'm a variance fiend. I guess you just rubbed off on me over the past year. This one has the best variance as far as I could tell,
Mhm.
and this whole lot came from Cadet, who I think regrets selling it to us now. Anytime that they see your name next to a horse that was sold, I think there's a little bit of regret. But this horse can probably compete, probably the only one of these that can compete in top twos, like at the highest level. So, if you see this one at level 700, it could be a legitimate, champion type racehorse. Long ways out though, right?
Long ways out, but yeah, with I mean, I guess XP NFTs, it's going to be very interesting, and this might be a segue into our last segment talking XP NFTs. Um, do we want to move on to that, or you want to
Yeah,
finish
my
talking about this?
segue was going to be I think Saberwalk is worth an XP NFT at level 520 with that good start in the maiden. You agree?
Yeah, I would even do more. I would say like all of these horses would be top priority in terms of our stable because we're never going to have enough tokens to throw it on every single horse that we want leveled up. But I think with the way the game is going, all of these, for a couple reasons, would be the ones we should focus on maximizing their level because, like, the level, I think that the metric would be like level con- controlling for number of total races it's run is more important than ever um, in these bands, right? Because that's who you're going to be competing against. So if the average 251 to 500 horse is a level 600, and I can get my horse to 641 or even get it to 650, that's a massive advantage. And with this, like horses are going to be funneling in and out on a weekly basis. So I think you want to optimize, especially for the first 500 races, choosing opportunities not only to make the most money, but to gain as much XP and levels as you can because you're competing against horses of the same number of races. So if you can get more bang for your buck from a race perspective than they are, that'll give you a better chances in the tournament when it comes.
Yeah, I think that that's the pretty much the biggest strategy now in this game. And there's a lot more strategy to this than there really has ever been in the past. Like we have limited resources. Everybody does. We do. Like we race. Probably more than anybody other than like Running Justice and Catch Me Riding. And we don't even come close to having the necessary amount of XP NFTs to deploy on all the horses that we would like to, right? And we're not going to go out and spend, 10x. We did spend 10x last night for that tournament on some of them to take advantage. I went over this with Keith though when he was on, Kevin. I don't know if you caught all of that, but there's definitely a time value aspect to XP NFTs. Like they are never going to be as in short supply, and they're never going to have as much value as they do right when they're launched, when you're able to gain a relative advantage on the rest of the field, right?
I think so. I mean, there's going to be buyers, and it might be more buyers than people originally thought of it. But yeah, the price will inevitably come down as supply goes up, and as in this case for next week, like engagement goes down. But to us, like that'd be an opportunity. So I agree with that. I think the other piece in terms of why I would focus on those most recent 11 purchases for our NFTs is
FTs
for me.
actually, they are fungible apparently.
Oh, okay, well, fair enough. Um, I think with that, the metric I think of is like how much does it cost us to level up a horse? So when you have RSB, who's at 686, takes 15, 20K XP. If you're paying for these XP tokens, suddenly you're paying, I don't know, 12,000 XP. So 12 of the tokens at a $5 cost at the time of this. So that's like $60 per level. Feels steep. But when you're comparing it to like the most recent purchase we had, that's a level 520. I don't know what the XP down there is. I imagine it's like 1,000 tops, maybe even less. So you're talking you can get a level for a twelfth of the cost you're going to have for an RSB. And on top of that, that horse arguably has more utility than RSB does right now. So it's just like a double dip, no doubter for me to flood those horses that are gonna get more leveling from each XP NFT, and the competition matters more for those because that's where all the money's going now, and it's a time based competition rather than an open class. So that just like makes it even more relative to your peers, which makes the optimal running of each race even more important. So it's a no-brainer. I think we should be just loading up all 11 of those for the foreseeable future until they change formats.
Yeah, so obviously you're right because you're Zed Jesus over there. Counterpoint though, there's going to be people that don't want to play the game this way that we're going to play it, right? And that's totally fine too, right? Like Southern Farms is not going to play that game. Southern Farms is going to continue to put every single bit of resources on the top horses. And is that a good use of resources at this moment? Doesn't seem like it, but the meta is going to change, right? And eventually there's going to be value in doing that. So if that's your cup of tea and that's the way that you want to play the game, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? It's just not what we see as optimal considering the resources that we have and our personalities and how we're able to operate, right?
Yeah, and I think you'll absolutely see like some of our top horses slip, relatively speaking. I mean, as we focus more on this, and I think I'm okay with that because I think any stable that doesn't allow their horses to slip are basically banging their heads against the top of C1 wall that has a 0 to 5% ROI for all horses, positive or negative, and that's all going to be negative with this rake. So you're basically investing not only in the XP NFT, but you're investing in accepting you're going to lose rake on all of those races. There's just like the competition's so stiff. If you're not overlaying it with some turning upside, you're just passing money back and forth. And with the 10% rake, Zed's making it where you're passing them money and nobody else is left with profit.
I mean, I really hope that there is a payoff. Like there has to be a payoff, like we said earlier in the show, to doing that right now and getting that advantage on us with I mean, we're still gonna be running our top horses, obviously. We're just not going to be deploying the XP NFTs and optimizing how fast they're leveling relative to stables like Southern Farms and probably Grand Cru and Plottin and Trottin. But I think they likely will be rewarded. They're going to be rewarded in Legends League. Fortunately for us, I think there's this silver lining that like our top horses have a ton of variance. So, third head, RSB, they're already at points where like they're going to be able to have probably some ROI against any field forever, for the rest of their races. It's just that's a diminishing supply, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like Callus is the same way, where it just like I mean, it's close enough to 700 now where I'm not worried about. I would throw in a race full of 700s and it would hold its own just fine in the right format. So I'd rather wait for the right format. Like, because the worst thing we could be doing right now is seeing all the liquidity only go to C1 top double ups, right? And like, it's either run Caus there or preserve races, except we're going to be a little few levels behind, but save it for a more optimal winner take all style format. I would just lean heavily towards waiting for that proper format now that we're close enough to the cap where I know that he can compete.
We're getting towards the end here, Kevin. I guess I'll wrap up by saying all of the stuff that we're talking about and these wrinkles of strategy and different ways to play it are why I have been a believer in like the progression system and XP NFTs and this vision of this market, because it's a better game than ever existed in 2021. As much as we loved, the lottery of breeding, and we couldn't lose, what was there not to love with breeding 2.0 and all that? This game, it works. It's a lot of fun, and like it's just a shame that communication snafus have to keep getting in the way of us being able to promote this and get everybody on board with it and get new people into the game, because there is potential and there's opportunity. I was having a conversation with Roid Rager out on Twitter, and like he's saying, well, there's no point to use XP NFTs in class 2 and class 3 because class 1, every level is more base ability and more bang for your buck. But it's there's all of these little strategies there. Like I don't think that that's necessarily true, right? And there's so much to look at here, because all those class 2 horses are running against other class 2 horses. It's all relative, right? So yeah, you're getting more bang for your buck, but it's apples to oranges, right? And if you've got a class 2 horse that has the right trait mix and has really nice variance and is at level 460, why not throw some XP NFTs on them, get them to the 470 area, and then take off, and you got all kinds of profit there theoretically. So I don't know. There's a lot
I
there.
think it's interesting. I mean, Road Rager and I I think similarly, he's always in the like run as optimal as possible camp, right? Um, so I think I get what he's saying in that aspect, and I think there's truth to it. But I would counter with like, if you have a horse that is 301, right? With one XP token, you're going to be able to get 5 levels. So would it be better served to do 5 levels where you're getting, maybe that's equal to, I don't know, 0.2 levels in class 1 of base ability, or you throw it on your 680 who's going to get 1/12 of a level, which I'd rather still have the 1/5 of a level being like in C1 or in C3 terms than the one in for my 680 horse. So like even controlling for that variable, I think there's instances where it's best served for like the lowest level C3 horse. We did it with Lizzie McGuire, right? Like it went from like 301 to 320 in like 8 races. That's a great use in my mind, because that's almost a class 1 level. And like you're saying, relatively speaking, that's a fairly big jump in terms of how competitive it can be with all that variance in class 3. I almost feel like it's fine just running up against the 400s in any race now.
Yeah, and the last thought, because I know you got to run. Like Crazy Horse is saying, XP is XP. It's the same for all horses. It's just not true. It is not true at all. There's validity to using these XP NFTs on your stable horses at the top of class 1, because like if you're going to be running them in 1v1s, there's a massive advantage to having the higher level. So you want to keep that level advantage. Variance horses at the top of class 1, not like we said, like Caus, like it's not going to make as much of a difference there. But then we look at variance horses at the bottom of class 1. We want to level those up to this optimal range in the 530, 540 range, and take advantage of potential ROI and profits there. So it's like there's just a ton of intricacy to this game, and I like it. It's just I'm not happy with how this is all played out.
Yeah, maybe a different episode we can talk about like tweaks you can make. I think that would be better than the current system, but I think there's a lot of good in the current system to where we're closer to like a functioning, fun game for everybody than people think. But yeah, you just can't miss the layups around communication that they just keep missing time and time again.
Yeah. Okay, Kevin, I'll let you run and get back to your other job, one of your 7 jobs. You
Yeah,
never
right.
sleep. We'll be back. Oh, so we got Legends League this week. Thursday, we're doing it Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. Going to be
Yep.
giving away 6 horses. So We've got the Fitzgerald O, I think, full is going to be the prize for our play wagering this week. So make sure you're following us on Twitch and come check it out. We will live stream this on YouTube as well, but it's really more of a notification for people. Like, keep it on your radar. Maybe it pops up on your phone. You really want to get over to Twitch and watch it, because that's where the play wagering is going to take place, and you'll have the opportunity to win these horses. We'll be raffling off 3 horses. Should be a blast. It's the finals for Legends League. And you can also sign up for the qualifier on zombie.racing for season 2 of the Legends League. I think we're at 38 or 39 signups right now. So we're going to close that, I think, probably today or something. Anyway, follow Kevin on Twitter at Arbitrage.Racing. I'm at Zed Diamond Hands. Subscribe to this. Make sure you're following us on Twitch. This is a YouTube. Subscribe, like, whatever. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for sticking with Zed. Hopefully everybody's not too pissed off at me for the whole pulse crap. I don't know. We'll try to figure out a way forward, man.
All right.
Later.
See ya.